told you that being a highly skilled, really well-rounded generalist is
No,
actually...
it's the fastest way to make yourself completely obsolete.
Yeah, exactly. Which
Yeah.
is crazy, right? Because that's the exact thing you were probably taught makes a great leader in today's economy.
Right. I mean, we usually think that to solve a massive problem, whether you're launching a global tech product or, drafting an international climate treaty.
You just need a smart, adaptable leader, someone to map out a grand strategy.
Exactly. We pull out this massive solid paper map. We highlight a 5-year plan in bright yellow marker, and, well, we just assume the landscape is going to stay exactly where the map says it is.
Which is such a comforting illusion.
It really is. You draft a plan, you have a solid beginning, a messy middle, a triumphant end. You build this, false sense of control.
But then you step out of the boardroom and into the modern world. And suddenly that paper map is worse than useless. I mean, it's actively dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. The roads are moving, the bridges are dissolving.
Right. The destination keeps changing its coordinates while you're driving. We're looking at a global landscape that is entirely fluid.
Which is the absolute definition of trying to navigate a liquid environment with, solid-state tools. The map is no longer the territory. In fact, there is no solid territory left.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're exploring how you, yes, you listening right now, can untangle the world's most complex problems when the ground is just constantly shifting.
Because whether you're scaling a tech startup, analyzing macroeconomic shifts, or navigating global crises like AI ethics, the old maps are failing.
They really are. And we have a massive stack of source material to guide us today. We're synthesizing Beata Mosor's frameworks on the Soloeconomy and AI-powered research.
Along with some really cutting-edge modern diplomatic strategy documents.
Yeah, and we're mixing that with foundational texts of the startup world, right? Eric Ries's The Lean Startup, Steve Blank's The 4 Steps to the Epiphany, and the core principles of lean analytics.
It's a phenomenal combination of texts. Because on the surface, international diplomacy and Silicon Valley startups operate in, completely different realities.
Totally. One moves at the speed of bureaucracy and the other at the speed of broadband.
Right. Yet the underlying structural crisis they're both facing is identical.
Exactly. So our mission today is to figure out the mechanics of survival in this environment. Like, how do we abandon our personal biases? How do we escape what our sources call reality distortion?
And crucially, how do we use market-driven logic, relentless experimentation, and AI to discover the actual root causes of these complex structural problems?
So what does this all mean? Like, where do we even begin to look for answers when the institutions we used to rely on are basically melting?
Well, we begin by defining the melting process itself. Our sources anchor this whole discussion in the concept of liquid modernity.
Liquid modernity.
Yeah. It's a term originally coined by sociologist Zygmunt Bauman, which Beata Mosor adapts to describe our immediate economic reality. We're transitioning out of a solid, predictable world into a highly volatile, liquid one.
Let me pause you there because liquid sounds a bit abstract.
Okay.
What does a liquid economy actually look like for the people operating inside it?
Think about the 20th century. Economic and political power was built on massive, sluggish, macroeconomic hierarchies. Solid structures.
Like huge, immovable corporations.
Right, and slow-moving government bureaucracies, linear career paths. Today, Mosor introduces the concept of the Soloeconomy.
The Soloeconomy.
Yeah. The economic center of gravity is shifting violently away from those massive systems directly to the autonomous individual. The old structures are dissolving.
And because information and capital are moving so fast, old methods of problem solving, which basically relied on institutional inertia and really slow consensus, they're failing us on a global scale.
Which brings us back to that provocative idea about the death of the generalist. The diplomatic strategy documents we reviewed highlight something called the generalist trap.
Right, the generalist trap. Because for decades, if you wanted to be a leader or a diplomat, you were explicitly trained to be a generalist.
Exactly. You learned how to speak in vague protocol, how to smooth over cultural tensions.
How to be adaptable across a wide range of topics without ever getting too into the technical weeds, basically.
And in a solid world, that model worked. It was all about relationship management. But in a liquid, highly specialized global economy, that generalist model is a massive strategic liability.
See, I have to challenge that premise a little bit, because in a chaotic, fast-moving world, wouldn't being a highly adaptable jack of all trades be exactly what you need? Like, if the environment is liquid, shouldn't the leader be fluid too?
It sounds right, but there is a critical difference between cognitive adaptability and technical shallowness. The generalist model creates this veneer of competence that completely collapses under the weight of modern technical complexity.
Give me an example.
Look at the structural issues we face today. AI, neural network architecture, algorithmic ethics, cryptography, data-driven migration
Oh,
policy.
yeah, you can't just wing those.
Right. You cannot govern the logic of a machine learning algorithm by just discussing its general societal impact over a cup of tea with an ambassador.
You get destroyed.
Exactly. Deep specialization is required. The sources argue that specialized diplomats are now exponentially more valuable than generalists because they actually possess the technical vocabulary to understand the systems they are trying to regulate.
Okay, I see the distinction now. Trying to solve modern global problems with 20th century generalist diplomacy is like trying to fix a Tesla's autonomous driving software using a blacksmith's hammer.
That is a perfect analogy.
Like, you might have the best intentions, but you don't even have the vocabulary to interface with the architecture. You're just going to smash the screen.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, technology is no longer just an add-on or a tool for leadership or diplomacy. It is the foundational language of 21st century power.
Specialized data is the new infrastructure.
Right. And if you don't understand the infrastructure on a granular level, you're merely a spectator. You are totally unable to influence the outcome.
That paints a pretty stark picture for leadership. I mean, if we can't rely on our generalized intuition or traditional planning anymore, how do we actually make decisions? Because clearly, guessing in a boardroom isn't cutting it.
It definitely isn't. This is where the sources demand we fundamentally reorganize our operational DNA. Since the liquid economy destroys assumptions so rapidly, we have to shift to a framework that actively destroys our own personal biases before the market does it for us.
So we need ruthless, evidence-based leadership.
Exactly. And this drops us right into the heart of lean analytics and the lean startup. Our sources talk extensively about the danger of success theater.
Success theater. Let's break that down because it's so incredibly seductive.
Success theater is perhaps the most dangerous trap in both business and government. It happens when leaders rely on self-created narratives and vanity metrics rather than empirical data.
Let's talk about those vanity metrics. In the startup world, it's, pointing to a massive spike in website traffic and poppin' champagne.
While completely ignoring the fact that none of those visitors actually converted into paying customers.
Right. It looks fantastic on a graph. You can show it to your board of directors, but it's a complete delusion.
And in the realm of global diplomacy, a vanity metric might be the number of countries that sign a non-binding climate pledge.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It generates great press photos, great headlines. But if you look at the empirical data a year later, and carbon emissions haven't dropped by a single metric ton.
The signature was just theater, playing make-believe with spreadsheets.
Exactly. To break out of that, Eric Ries introduces the scientific method of the lean startup, the build, measure, learn loop.
So you don't build a massive product or draft a comprehensive 1,000-page policy in secret for 2 years and pray the public accepts it.
No, absolutely not. You build the smallest possible thing to test a specific hypothesis. You measure the response with real behavioral data, you learn from it, and then you iterate.
It's a continuous iteration meta-pattern, and that's crucial for finding the root cause of problems, right? Which the sources highlight through Toyota's famous 5 Whys methodology.
Yes, the 5 Whys.
I want to spend a minute on this because it sounds almost too simple to be effective, but the mechanics of it are brilliant. Let's walk through that classic factory floor example.
Sure. Imagine a massive, expensive piece of machinery stops working in a factory. The immediate observable symptom is a blown fuse.
Okay, so the traditional quick fix approach, the success theater approach, is to just replace the fuse, turn the machine back on, and report to management that uptime has been restored.
Problem solved. Everyone goes to lunch.
Until the exact same fuse blows again the next morning.
Precisely. So Toyota forces its engineers to ask why 5 consecutive times to drill down to the foundation. Why did the machine stop? A fuse blew because of an electrical overload.
Why was there an overload?
The bearing wasn't sufficiently lubricated, causing friction.
Why wasn't it lubricated?
The lubrication pump wasn't pumping enough oil.
Why wasn't it pumping?
The internal pump shaft was worn out.
And why was the shaft worn out?
Because metal scrap got into the mechanism.
Why did metal scrap get in?
Because an operator forgot to attach a simple mesh strainer over the intake valve.
Boom. That is the magic of the framework right there. You go from a highly technical fault, a blown fuse, to the actual human behavioral root cause, a missing strainer.
It completely strips away the symptoms. And what is truly fascinating is how this exact methodology is being translated into global policy.
Okay, how so?
The diplomatic strategy sources suggest moving away from grand sweeping treaties and adopting a minimum viable policy, or MVP.
A minimum viable policy.
Right. Instead of spending 5 years negotiating a massive theoretical regulatory framework for something like AI ethics, you take the smallest possible regulatory action. You implement it in a controlled environment, generate immediate, measurable results, and get feedback before attempting to scale it globally.
Hold on, I need to push back heavily here. I understand an MVP for a software app. If an app crashes, someone is annoyed. But how do you run a minimum viable policy in high-stakes diplomacy?
It's a fair question.
Like, the whole move fast and break things startup mentality seems wildly irresponsible, even disastrous, when you're dealing with national security, migration, or climate change. You can't just release a beta version of a climate treaty and see what breaks.
It is a very valid concern, but it highlights a common misunderstanding of the MVP concept. A minimum viable policy doesn't mean being reckless or launching half-baked laws.
Okay, then what does it mean in practice?
It means radically reducing the scope of the initial test to limit collateral damage. Instead of a sweeping national overhaul, a government might test a new data privacy regulation in a single municipality or within a specific subsector of the financial industry.
Ah, so you create a controlled sandbox.
Exactly. You measure the friction, you observe the unintended consequences on a micro scale, and you adapt the legislation before you force it onto the macroeconomy.
The sources mention that running a business or a policy this way is like running it in an aquarium, where everybody can see what's going on. You have dashboards, everything is empirical and transparent.
Yeah, full visibility.
But doesn't running your experiments in a glass box terrify leaders? If you're constantly testing and measuring in reality rather than hiding behind vanity metrics, you're going to fail publicly, and you're going to fail often.
This raises an important question about the psychology of modern leadership, because yes, it terrifies people. Founders, CEOs, and diplomats alike pour their blood, sweat, and massive egos into their grand visions.
Of course they do.
And acknowledging that a core hypothesis was wrong is deeply painful. But the sources are unflinching on this point. Embracing that public failure is the absolute only way to avoid getting trapped in what they call the land of the living dead.
The land of the living dead. Whew, that is a chilling phrase.
It really is. It describes a project, a startup, or a government initiative that isn't growing, but isn't quite dying either.
It just consumes resources endlessly.
Exactly. Limping along. Because the leadership lacks the courage to look at the empirical data and admit, our hypothesis was flawed, we need to pivot.
It requires the ultimate ego death, basically. You have to submit your brilliant idea to the harsh, unforgiving reality of the market. Which brings us to the next vital concept, the mandate to get out of the building.
Yes. You can ask the 5 whys all day long in a comfortable boardroom, but if you're entirely isolated from the real world, you're just analyzing your own echo chamber.
You're finding the root cause of your own assumptions.
Precisely. This is Steve Blank's golden rule from the 4 steps to the epiphany.
Yeah.
You cannot find facts inside your office building. You have to physically or digitally get out and interact with the environment.
Right, and Blank makes a really sharp, critical distinction here between customer discovery and customer validation.
He does. Discovery is where you take your hypotheses, your educated guesses about what the customer or citizen actually wants, and you go talk to real human beings to corroborate if that problem even exists in the wild.
And importantly, during that discovery phase, you are not trying to sell them anything. You're utilizing analytical tools like the unique value proposition or UVP canvas.
Let's define the UVP canvas quickly for those who haven't used it.
Yeah, it's essentially a map that forces you to look at the customer's pains, their potential gains, and the jobs to be done. You are deliberately not focused on your product's shiny features.
Right, you're focused entirely on the functional, emotional, and social tasks the user is desperately trying to accomplish.
Exactly. For example, nobody actually wants to buy a 1/4-inch drill bit. They want to buy a 1/4-inch hole in their wall so they can hang a picture.
That is the perfect distinction. The sources hammer home a sequence that cannot be skipped. You must find problem-solution fit before you even attempt product-market fit.
You have to definitively prove the problem exists. and is painful enough that people care before you spend millions scaling a business or a bureaucracy to solve it.
Exactly. And a brilliant, tangible example of this from the text is the early days of Airbnb, specifically their concierge MVP experiment.
Oh, I love this story. So they noticed their property listings in New York City were severely underperforming. The photos taken by the hosts were terrible.
We're talking flip phone camera quality,
Yeah.
terrible lighting, messy rooms, just awful.
Right. And instead of retreating into a month-long strategic planning session on how to build a complex, automated photography network into their software architecture, they followed the rule.
They got out of the building.
The founders flew to New York, rented a high-quality camera, and literally knocked on their users' doors to take professional photos of the apartments themselves.
They took the absolute smallest, most manual action possible to test their hypothesis. They didn't write a single line of code.
And the result was immediate. The listings with the new professional photos saw a massive spike in bookings.
They validated the financial value of professional visuals empirically with minimal investment. They proved the problem solution fit before they ever attempted to automate or scale the feature.
It's brilliant. But I have to play devil's advocate here because this whole process sounds exhausting. If we're constantly out of the building, talking to customers, and adjusting our product based on what they say.
Aren't we just going to end up with a massive, contradictory wish list of features?
Yes. There's that famous quote attributed to Henry Ford, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Customers don't always know what they actually need.
That is the most common trap people fall into when trying to adopt lean methodology.
Mm.
But Steve Blank's framework has a strict rule to prevent exactly that scenario.
Which is?
Customer development is absolutely not a focus group.
Yeah.
The founders or the policymakers must define the initial vision. The product specification comes from your insight, not from averaging out a bunch of random customer requests.
So you aren't asking them to design the product for you.
Exactly. The customers merely validate whether there is a real painful problem that matches your vision. And, critically, whether they are willing to pay for your proposed solution. You are testing your hypothesis against their reality.
So if they ask for a faster horse, your job isn't to breed horses.
No, your job is to use the 5 whys to understand that their actual job to be done is getting from point A to point B in half the time, which validates your vision for the automobile.
I want to push on that just a little further. In the heat of the moment when you're doing this research, how do you actually tell the difference? Like when a customer looks at your MVP and says, I hate this feature, how do you know if your vision is fundamentally wrong or if you're just talking to the wrong customer who doesn't fit your target demographic?
That is where you look for the pain. During customer discovery, if the person you're talking to doesn't exhibit any frustration or urgency around the problem you are discussing, they're the wrong customer. Move on.
Okay, but what if they are frustrated?
If they are deeply frustrated by the problem, like they're losing money, they're losing time, and they still hate your solution, that is when you know your vision is flawed and you need to pivot.
That clarifies it perfectly. You bring the vision, they provide the reality check. So we know we need to relentlessly iterate. We know we need to interrogate the root cause with the 5 whys, and we know we need to get out of the building.
Right.
But here is the massive, unavoidable bottleneck: time. In this liquid, fast-moving solo economy, where market conditions and geopolitical realities shift in a matter of weeks, doing all of this manual interviewing, transcribing, and data synthesizing is painfully slow.
It's incredibly slow.
By the time you analyze the data, the market has moved.
Which is precisely why Beata Moser's framework introduces the AI-powered research engine. If the future is liquid and high velocity, your structural research methodology has to match that exact velocity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is where the methodology takes a massive leap forward.
Moser developed a process called the CIRC model. It's basically designed to accelerate this deep structural analysis without losing the nuance of human insight. And she uses a very specific technological stack to pull this off and abandon human bias.
Let's break down the mechanics of that stack because it's crucial to understand how this isn't just generating text, but synthesizing meaning.
Okay, first you have the raw data collection. You're out of the building conducting these deep qualitative interviews with stakeholders. Moser uses a tool like fireflies.ai to record and transcribe those live kickoff workshops and interviews in real time.
The value there is obvious. You aren't frantically taking notes, dropping half the context, or filtering the customer's words through your own confirmation bias. The AI captures the raw, unfiltered reality of the conversation.
Exactly. You secure structured, perfectly accurate text input. Then you take that massive mountain of qualitative data, dozens of hours of transcripts, and you feed it into Google Gemini Advanced.
Specifically utilizing the Gemini 2.5 model, right?
Yes, Gemini 2.5. And it's important to understand what is happening under the hood here. This isn't just asking a chatbot to write an email. It's being used for deep structural synthesis.
How exactly does it synthesize? Because when people hear AI analysis, they often think of it just summarizing a document. But it's doing much more than that, right? Like, I think of this specific AI process less like a calculator and more like a master detective standing in front of one of those massive cork boards covered in red string.
That is a much more accurate metaphor. When you feed 50 interviews into Gemini, it's mapping semantic relationships across millions of data points simultaneously.
Finding the hidden connections.
Right. It finds the hidden linguistic correlations and recurring pain points across all those conversations. Connections that a human researcher dealing with fatigue and memory limits would inevitably drop by interview number 3.
And it cross-references the raw transcripts with live macroeconomic trends, financial data, and massive PDFs of competitor analysis.
Exactly. And finally, she utilizes Google AI Studio with specialized experimental thinking models to handle the more complex creative structuring.
So by using AI Studio, researchers can build strict prompting frameworks to constrain the AI, preventing it from hallucinating or making things up.
Yes, and forcing it to generate rigorous ideation scenarios and strategic maps based solely on the verified data. The compression of time this enables is just staggering.
The sources provide a really detailed case study on this from the automotive industry. A team was tasked with developing a highly complex product strategy and business models for an EV market B2B2C marketplace.
Let's define that acronym quickly for clarity. B2B2C means business to consumer.
Right, so in the EV context, it might mean building a software platform that you sell to a local auto mechanic, the business, who then uses that software to provide charging services directly to the everyday driver, the consumer.
It is an incredibly complex supply chain to map out. Historically, conducting the deep atomic research, customer discovery, and strategic mapping for a multi-tiered marketplace like that would take a consulting firm months of labor.
But by leveraging this specific AI stack to ingest all their field observations, stakeholder friction points, and workshop data, they were able to build a flawless, evidence-based strategic roadmap in a tightly constrained 2-week sprint.
It literally bends time.
It's wild, like a high-speed particle accelerator for data, taking messy human interviews, smashing them together, isolating the fundamental atoms of truth.
What's fascinating here is how this extreme velocity completely shifts the nature of strategic focus. When you can process and synthesize qualitative data that fast, your team stops obsessing over building tiny functional features.
And you are freed up to look at delivering holistic value.
Exactly. In that automotive case study, the AI didn't just spit out a sterile list of software features. It helped the team generate a comprehensive business model that prioritized value across the entire supply chain.
From the auto parts manufacturer to the mechanic, all the way to the end driver, because the AI could hold all the conflicting variables and data points in its memory at once.
Right, without the cognitive fatigue or the departmental bias a human team brings to the table after 3 weeks of staring at whiteboards.
And the true power of Moser's approach relies on what she calls the circular mode of AI training. It's an iterative feedback loop.
You do not just ask the AI question once and accept the output as gospel.
No, you feed it the initial interview data, it gives you structural insights and hypotheses. You take those hypotheses back out of the building to test them on real customers. You gather the new friction data, and you retrain the AI model with the fresh results.
It's the build, measure, learn loop, running on absolute steroids. The model deepens and refines its structural arguments over time. It is continuous, relentless, evidence-based learning.
So if we take a step back and look at this massive stack of insights, whether you listening to this right now are trying to scale a disruptive tech startup or analyze macroeconomic trends, or maybe you're a diplomat trying to develop robust global policy.
The fundamental lesson of the liquid economy remains the same. You cannot rely on your ego.
You cannot rely on 20th century generalist intuition.
And you absolutely cannot afford to participate in success theater while the ground shifts beneath you. It is entirely about reorganizing your operational DNA to master the AI-driven economy.
Rather than just battening down the hatches and waiting for the storm of liquid modernity to pass, you have to become comfortable with the reality that the map is gone.
You survive by adopting lean methodology, forcing yourself to ask the 5 whys until you hit the uncomfortable truth.
getting out of the building to face the harsh reality of the market, and leveraging AI as your ultimate unbiased research partner to find the real root causes of the structural problems you're trying to solve.
That's exactly it.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final, slightly uncomfortable thought to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've spent this entire deep dive talking about using AI and lean sprints to relentlessly iterate products, to refine corporate business models, and to test international diplomatic policies.
Right.
But if we are truly living in the age of the solo economy, where massive corporate hierarchies are dissolving and the economic center of gravity has shifted entirely to the autonomous individual,
Yeah.
what if the ultimate product you need to relentlessly test, measure, and pivot is actually your own talent stack?
Wow, that is a profoundly provocative question. Because if the market is entirely liquid, your skills and your assumptions cannot remain solid.
You have to apply the scientific method to yourself. Are you running a build, measure, learn loop on your own career?
Are you looking for empirical data to validate your skills, or are you operating on vanity metrics?
Because if you're navigating this shifting liquid ocean, the absolute last thing you want to be caught holding is an outdated paper map. Until next time, keep diving deep.